The Uinta Basin of Utah is a land of jagged beauty and crushing silence. For miles, the red rock mesas and the parched stretches of the high desert dominate the horizon. In the mid-1990s, the Sherman family arrived here, carrying dreams of a quiet life. They sought a place where their children could grow under wide-open skies and their prize cattle could graze in peace. The property seemed perfect, a sprawling ranch tucked beneath a massive mesa. They were eager to begin, unaware that the land was avoided by the local Ute tribe for generations. Beneath the surface of this pastoral dream, something ancient and malevolent was already watching their every move with predatory patience. Their first day brought an encounter that shattered their understanding of nature. A massive wolf emerged from the brush. It was larger than any wolf the father had seen, yet it approached with an eerie, unnatural calm. The creature was so docile that it allowed the family to pet its thick, gray fur. However, the peace was short-lived. The creature's demeanor shifted as it lunged at a calf inside a pen, clamping its powerful jaws around the animal's head with terrifying strength. Desperate to save his livestock, the father grabbed his high-caliber rifle. He stepped within inches and fired directly into its ribs. The blast echoed, but the wolf didn't flinch or release the calf. Stunned, the father fired again at point-blank range. To the family's horror, there was no blood or yelp of pain. The bullet seemed to impact solid stone. Eventually, the wolf let go and looked at them with cold, intelligent eyes. It didn't run. It simply walked away. They followed the tracks until they abruptly vanished in a clearing, as if the predator had dissolved into the desert air. This was only the beginning of a domestic nightmare that would soon unravel their sanity. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Inside the house, the walls offered no protection from the inexplicable forces at play. Heavy furniture would slide across the floor in the middle of the night, moved by unseen hands. Doors that had been deadbolted were found swinging open, and the choking smell of sulfur would fill rooms without warning, leaving the family gasping for air. They lived in a state of constant hypervigilance, frayed by the sound of heavy footsteps on the roof and whispers coming from the very air around them. Outside, the terror was even more tangible. The Shermans' prize-winning bulls began to vanish under impossible circumstances. One evening, the father found several missing from a locked pen. He found them miles away, squeezed into an abandoned trailer locked from the outside. There was no way the animals could have entered alone. Other times, they found cattle mutilated with surgical precision. Internal organs were removed through bloodless incisions, and large portions of flesh were vanished as if cut by a laser. No predators were ever seen near the carcasses, and local scavengers refused to approach the remains, sensing something fundamentally wrong. The family felt a suffocating sensation of being watched by invisible eyes that tracked their every movement. A low-frequency humming sound often vibrated in their chests, causing intense nausea and physical illness. It was as if the atmosphere itself was weaponized against them. Late at night, shimmering, circular holes would open in the sky above the mesa, revealing a different sky on the other side. They realized the giant wolf was merely a gatekeeper to something much more ancient. Something malevolent had claimed this land, and the Shermans were merely the latest prey in a cosmic game they could never hope to win. The shadows were lengthening, and the true nightmare was only just beginning to take shape. They looked at one another, the silence of the ranch feeling heavier than ever. Somewhere in the distance, a sound like tearing metal cut through the night, echoing off the cliffs and peaks. Broken and weary, the Sherman family finally abandoned their dream, selling the ranch in 1996. The buyer was billionaire Robert Bigelow, a man obsessed with the fringes of science. He founded the National Institute for Discovery Science, or NIDS. These were not amateur hunters, they were elite physicists, biologists, and former intelligence officers. They arrived with a fortress of logic, meticulously installing state-of-the-art surveillance, high-caliber radiation sensors, and underground microphones. They established a command center that hummed with the constant electricity of expensive monitors and servers, turning the dusty ranch house into a high-tech bunker. They intended to pin the phenomenon under a microscope, believing that data would reveal a rational explanation for the madness the Shermans had endured. However, the ranch reacted with chilling, predatory defiance. The scientists soon realized they weren't dealing with a static haunting, but an ancient, precognitive intelligence that anticipated their advanced plans. If they pointed a camera at a field, the activity occurred just out of frame. If they set up a complex sensor array, the equipment was shredded by unseen hands or drained of power despite brand new batteries. Cables were sliced with surgical precision, while researchers stood mere feet away. It became clear that the entity was not a mindless force. It was playing a game. It allowed itself to be sensed, but never captured, mocking the very foundations of human scientific inquiry. Amidst the frustration of failed equipment, visual encounters became more frequent. Researchers reported luminous blue orbs, the size of ethereal softballs, darting through the brush. These weren't mere brilliant lights. They appeared to possess a curious consciousness. In one harrowing incident, 3 guard dogs chased a particularly bright orb into the thicket. A sharp yelp echoed, followed by a sickening silence. When investigators reached the site, they found 3 circles of scorched, liquefied organic matter. Whatever these orbs were, they carried a lethal energy that could instantly incinerate flesh in a heartbeat, leaving the seasoned scientists trembling in the dark. The most profound breach of reality occurred near the vast mesa, where 2 scientists monitored the horizon with night vision goggles. Through the green lenses, they witnessed a shimmering rip appear in the air. It was a physical tear in the fabric of space. Looking through the hole, they didn't see the Utah desert. They saw a different sky, a different world entirely. Then, a massive, disturbing humanoid creature, muscular and covered in dark hair, deliberately crawled out of the void and dropped to the ground. It ignored the scientists, disappearing into the shadows of our world as the portal sealed shut. The laws of physics had been discarded like old rags. As the haunted investigation continued, the terror bled across the ranch's boundaries. Team members experienced the hitchhiker effect. The phenomena didn't stay in Utah, it followed them home. Men returned to distant states only to find shadow figures in their hallways or families, describing the same sulfurous smells and whispers that haunted the ranch. The scientists weren't just observing a location, they were being infected. Their sanity frayed as the line between the research site and their private lives vanished. Panic set in as they realized their scientific armor was useless against a force that could reach into their homes. They were no longer the observers. They were the observed, caught in the web of something that traversed space and time at will. During a final sweep of a damaged sensor array, a lead investigator discovered something that chilled his blood. Burned into the metal casing of a hardened piece of equipment were a singular set of precise geographic coordinates. They weren't for the house or the mesa. They pointed to a specific location on the ranch that, according to every topographic map and satellite scan, should not exist. It was a mathematical impossibility, a location tucked within a pocket of space that defied the very dimensions of the Earth. The intelligence was no longer just hiding. It was silently inviting them into a place where the human mind was never meant to go. The scientific team began to look backward, turning to the ancient wisdom of the Ute tribe. The indigenous people had avoided this jagged stretch of the Wichita Basin for generations, identifying it as the path of the Skinwalker. To them, the land was a cursed territory, a permanent home for a shape-shifting sorcerer of Navajo lore who had taken root in the red clay. The land was not just ground, but a living history of terror. Ute elders spoke of a place where the skin of the world grew thin, allowing malevolent spirits to slip through. While the researchers initially dismissed these stories as folklore, the precision of the tribal warnings began to mirror their own data. These legends spoke of portals and beings walking between dimensions long before modern physics conceived of the term wormhole. The ranch was a threshold, a barrier between our logical world and a dimension governed by predatory intent that had existed long before the first settlers arrived. The investigation reached a fever pitch during a final attempt to force the entity into the light. Near the base of the looming mesa, the NIDS team deployed a battery of high-frequency electromagnetic emitters, hoping to provoke a reaction. The response was instantaneous and devastating. A silent wave of energy erupted from the ridge, a massive electromagnetic pulse that surged through the valley. It did not merely drain the batteries, it fried the circuitry of every piece of equipment on the ranch. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in surveillance tech died in a single heartbeat. The constant hum of the cooling fans vanished, replaced by a silence so thick it felt like a physical weight. The darkness that followed was absolute, swallowing the scientists in an abyss where their tools were now nothing more than useless scrap metal. In the hollow quiet of the blackout, the lead investigator pressed his dead headset against his ears. Though there was no power or transmission, a sound began to bleed through the cold speakers. It was a chorus of disembodied voices, speaking in a guttural tongue that resonated within his skull. The tone was unmistakable. They were being mocked. The voices mimicked the researchers' own cadences, laughing with a metallic edge at their pathetic attempts to quantify the infinite. In that moment of isolation, the terrifying truth settled into the marrow of their bones. The phenomenon was not a mystery to be solved. It was a superior, precognitive intelligence that had been studying the scientists since the moment they crossed the cattle guard. They were not the observers. They were the lab rats in a cosmic cage, being prodded by an entity that understood human psychology better than they understood themselves. Broken and exhausted, Robert Bigelow eventually withdrew, his dream of scientific conquest replaced by a weary respect for the unknown. The ranch changed hands again, moving to Brandon Fugel, a mogul who arrived with even more sophisticated technology, including drones and laser mapping. Yet, despite the generational leap in hardware, the Skinwalker remained indifferent. This enigma defies every camera lens and every sensor ever designed. Fugel's team encountered the same flickering orbs, the same impossible geometries, and the same sense of an ancient presence waiting behind the veil. The ranch continues as a black box of science, a place where the fundamental laws of the universe are routinely suspended. It is a predator that never truly sleeps. It serves as a humbling reminder that our understanding of reality is merely a fragile, thin veil, easily torn by forces we can neither control nor comprehend. Utah's Skinwalker Ranch stands as a silent sentinel of the unexplained, a place where shadows do not just hide things. They are things. If the brightest minds and the bravest families fled before dawn, the question remains: would you have the courage to stand in the dark of that Utah valley, knowing that something out there is not just watching you, but waiting for you to realize that you are the prey?